반복되는 딥페이크 성범죄 국가도.
For the second time in just a few years, women in South Korea are taking to the streets to demand an end to online sexual abuse. The National Police Agency is investigating hundreds of cases involving deepfake pornography, where the faces of real women and girls are digitally superimposed onto other bodies without their knowledge or consent. And this week, reporter Lee Jungjoo with the Korean Herald, the country's largest English language daily, delves into the rising fears surrounding deepfakes and what's needed to protect women from cyber-sexual exploitation. It's Wednesday, September the 25th. Jungjoo, thank you so much for speaking with us. The Korean National Police are currently investigating over 500 cases of deepfake pornography, but the repercussions seem to be extending way beyond just 500 individuals. As a female journalist, how concerned are you personally, as well as the female friends around you? Are you concerned about this growing epidemic in South Korea?
Seeing that deepfakes can really affect anyone, I think I'm quite concerned about deepfakes as well. I find myself double thinking whenever I post anything on social media, and I do worry that photos of myself could be used for some other purposes that I didn't consent to. Because there were also some local reports made about perpetrators making sexually explicit deepfakes of journalists here, like who wrote about the recent incident and like as a method of like revenge and saying like, oh, like let's see how you feel like if you become the victim. And as someone who writes actively about this issue, I think that has left me a little bit fearful as well. I also have a few friends who have deleted like their photos from their social media accounts because of the same kind of fear of like deepfakes. Or I know some people who have organized like their list of like friends that they connect with on social media, or just to make sure like the people that they really trust or the people that they feel like they are really close with are among their followers list. Or some who have made their accounts private on social media to make sure only their closest friends are following their accounts.
Quite often, the people who make these deepfakes are those around you.
Right.
And I have this number. It's quite astonishing that last year, two-thirds of the 180 reported cases were teenagers. And then this year, so far, 79% of the suspects that are detained are also adolescents. So this deepfake problem appears to be a particular epidemic spreading among the younger generation in South Korea. And how have minors become vulnerable both as victims and as perpetrators?
According to some experts in Korea, apparently deepfaking their peers is really nothing new among these teenagers. At the time, it was something more close to or not at the time, but like before like this became such a big deal, it was something more close to like a trend or like a play culture. And a lot of these perpetrators confessed apparently during questioning that they committed such acts just for fun and they didn't really mean any harm. And as to why there's so many minors who are also victims, like you said, I think it's because it's related to the fact that a lot of these teenagers who are perpetrators would make such deepfakes out of their peers, and the peers of most teenagers would also be teenagers, leading to both victims and perpetrators having more minors.
Okay, so a lot of minors, when they
Mhm.
did such an act, they wasn't fully aware of how much harm it could cause to the people that they
Mhm.
were, quoting, making fun of. And do you think digital ethics education has become very critical for a time like this?
Mhm. Based on like what I just mentioned, there really was no digital ethics education required in this part of the digital world here in Korea. And that made it really easy to expose this sort of unfortunate incidents as something that was bound to happen in the future. And because there was no education available, a lot of these perpetrators didn't know what they were doing was a crime. And I think that's why this sort of digital ethics education is so crucial. especially in a world where technology is fast evolving. Because, I mean, who knows how technology will develop from here, right? Like, we may see technological advancements that are far beyond our imagination, leading to more crimes that are worse or maybe similar in this nature. And so, in the long run, if these teenagers are not educated on what sort of responsibility they hold over their actions on the internet, who knows what they could do if they become adults in the future.
Right. So there are
Mhm.
discussions about bringing digital ethics education, and have there been any attempts from the policymakers to introduce such an education program?
Mhm. Well, there has been attempts. For example, the president of South Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, he urged relevant ministries to come up with methods of digital ethics education to teach students at schools. And therefore, in response to that, the Ministry of Education has said that they will be conducting digital ethics education in schools. And it will mostly center around telling these students that this sort of action is not correct and it's not right. But also, it'll center around educating students as to what they should do if they ever fall victim to the crime, even if they shouldn't. They haven't really released like very detailed information as regards to what kind of education, like material, will be specifically involved in this sort of education. But that is still something that we've yet to see. But I think it's still, noteworthy to say the least that the government at least taking a stance to do something like this because according to some experts that I spoke to, apparently this has been something that a lot of experts have urged the government to do because they realize that this has become something like a play culture for these kids. But at the time, the government didn't really do anything in particular. But now that something has actually happened, they're trying to prevent it. And maybe some people could say it's too late, but at least it's better to do it now than do it whenever it's way too late.
Hmm. So it's become very necessary to raise the awareness among the younger generation.
Yes.
And following a
Mhm.
case like this, there's more discussion, of course. But it's been 5 years since the previous case,
Mhm.
then the nth room shocked the world. And there are people that
Mhm.
believe that sexual exploitation of women that should have been addressed a long time ago. And over these past 5 years, have there been other measures, attempts, efforts to address this issue, and why do they seem to be not sufficient to prevent another major case from happening?
So, 2 years ago, a set of seven laws that basically altogether earned its name as the Nth-Room Prevention Law or the Anti-Nth-Room laws. They were first brought up and they were passed in the National Assembly. They are all quite different in terms of their nature, but to briefly summarize a few, some of them gives operators of related cyber services the right and the obligation to check images, videos, or files for inappropriate content before they are transmitted, while also strictly punishing those who use or, I guess, disseminate sexual content with the purpose of sexual exploitation. But according to statistics provided by the Korean National Police Agency, the rate of digital sex crime cases are still really high, with 2,690 being recorded in 2019 and 2,314 being recorded last year. And this is because a lot of these digital sex crimes happen in Telegram, and Telegram falls out of scope from the list of related cyber services that must check in terms of the content that's being transmitted between those different chat rooms.
Hmm.
And also, according to local experts, the laws, besides that law itself, it fails to adapt to the consistently changing digital environment. So these perpetrators find ways to pretty much escape like being criminalized for their actions. And a lot of the times, the digital technology has developed so well that it's really easy to hide the perpetrators away from the officials' eyes. So they're saying, so a lot of experts have said that these laws must be amended so that it adapts to the changing technological environment. So that's kind of the limitations that Korea has faced in terms of these laws so far.
Huh. You brought up Telegram, which is at the heart of both
Hmm.
two scandals from 5 year and this time. And well, and their CEO has actually very recently been arrested in
Yes.
France. And what makes this platform the hotbed for the dissemination of the illegal content?
I mean, it could really occur on other platforms, but it's a lot more rare because Telegram's messages and chat rooms are encrypted and operates under a private server, and it kind of puts the users close to something like anonymity. And this gives the users more freedom to express however they please and to do whatever they wish to do without being scared that they will be monitored or caught. While in other platforms, for example, in Korea, we use Kakao Talk a lot, or sometimes Instagram, I guess.
Hmm.
But in those cases, your identity isn't as well as hidden, so they could be easily identified. So Telegram is something that they could use to make sure that their crimes are hidden away. And also, as Telegram is a platform that's based overseas, it is quite difficult for Korean authorities to ask Telegram to work together in investigating the illegal cases that go on the platform as well. But actually, just like I think this happened yesterday with the recent arrest of Pavel Durov, the CEO of Telegram. Basically, Telegram promised to provide more user data to governments after his arrest. And for like basically governments were looking into cracking down on cases that happen through the app.
Hmm.
And so maybe this will hopefully turn into something better where I guess the Korean government will be able to conduct more stricter crackdowns and therefore prevent further online sexual crimes from happening on the platform.
And so far, has the Korean authority formed any specific plan to engage with Telegram and perhaps other social media platforms?
For the first time, Korea's police officials announced that they will launch an investigation into Telegram, following allegations of complicity, aiding, and abetting online sexual crimes involving deepfake technology. They recognize that this is a difficult process for the reasons I stated above, but they added that they will also use their own investigative techniques by working with international organizations like Interpol to conduct a joint probe into Telegram. They haven't mentioned what these investigative techniques are for obvious reasons, but right now the National Assembly, they amended some laws into allowing the police to take undercover investigations into Telegram if they believe that there's victims who are minors who are being emerged from the crime. Before, if police wanted to conduct undercover investigations, they had to go through a bunch of I guess, higher authorities before receiving permission. But in the case of something like this, it's you don't have the time to like request all of this permission. You got to do it as soon as possible. So basically, the new amendment states that they're trying to minimize those processes so they can conduct undercover investigations more faster. It's not like concrete law as of yet because it still has to pass
Right.
a plenary session on Thursday, but it is something that the government is trying to work on as soon as possible. And also the same thing, the National Assembly, they amended a bill to strengthen punishment against deepfake sex crimes and victims and provide more victim support and to heavily punish those who target minors. And this will also be more further discussed on Thursday as well.
So while the authorities are taking actions, like you mentioned earlier, yourself as well as many female friends around you are either taking photos of your social media accounts or just deleting the accounts once and for all. And do you think people's online behaviors are being affected by the deepfakes and this malicious use of AI, especially for the women users?
Yes, definitely. I think, like my friends, a lot of others, especially underage girls, they're terminating their social media accounts or they're deleting their photos and videos online for fear that they could be used elsewhere for unintended and humiliating purposes. And there were some local media reports made about, for example, like someone's brother making these sorts of content out of their sister. And so a lot of parents are kind of on edge thinking like, oh, what if my son is someone who could be doing that to like my daughter or maybe to me because I'm also like a mother as well.
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of people in different, I guess, sectors of the society are concerned in their own ways in terms of how they could first they could prevent these incidents from happening to them, but also make sure that they stay away from, or like their friends or peers could stay away from these possible crimes from happening to them as well.
at the heart of a lot of these crimes are these very fast development of artificial intelligence, especially generative AI. Do you think these
Yes.
sexual crimes are changing the view of the Koreans on the development of artificial intelligence technology?
I don't think that anyone in Korea is very dismissive or negative about AI technology as a whole as of yet, because there are many other inventions that revolve around AI in Korea that has become really increasingly helpful in terms of our society's development. But it has definitely caught the public's attention in terms of the importance of receiving proper digital ethics education, as we've mentioned many
Right,
times in this interview,
right.
and as to what the proper use of artificial intelligence is. And many individuals are pushing for a law that allows for the ethical use of AI because South Korea is still yet to establish a legal system to identify, filter out, and punish those who wrongfully use such technologies.
So technology is never the problem, but rather how people use it.
Yes, I think that's the argument that a lot of Koreans are saying as well in terms of this case.
Thank you very much for speaking with us, Jungjoo.
Thank you for having me.
Last year, the United Nations established an advisory body focused on the international governance of AI. On September the 19th, they released its final report titled Governing AI for Humanity. And this report may only mark the beginning of a much-needed governance framework that must evolve alongside AI's ever-expanding capabilities. But for South Korea, and indeed the world, we still have to think about how to protect the most vulnerable from the dangers of AI misuse while embracing its potential to reshape society. That brings us to the end of this episode of Deep Dive. If you enjoyed what you just heard, don't forget to follow us on your podcast platform. Just search for Deep Dive. You can also leave comments to let us know what you want to learn about China and beyond. This episode is brought to you by me, Lee Jungjoo, and my colleagues Zhang Zhang and Qi Zhi. Special thanks to reporter Lee Jungjoo with the Korea Herald. I'll see you in the next one.